Engage. Disrupt. Adapt. Repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Wow, Mike, you had such an interesting conversation with Amy for this podcast.
Amy is an individual that everybody will love.
She was so honest and so raw in this podcast, and she's really learned a lot and is going through a true reinvention experience with her association.
Amy is a 25-plus year veteran of the association world. She's done almost every job at the association of which she now leads. And amazingly enough, is almost at this really next phase of her career where she's like a kid in a candy store, where she's now discovering all these new tools to use, and she is really excited. And it's really fun to see somebody that excited.
Well, what really impressed me is that she makes it very clear in the interview, she's not afraid to learn new stuff. She's eager to learn new stuff, to keep seeking, but she had to learn to be curious and how to find the courage to do that.
I think Amy is a role model for almost any executive in the kind of behavior that she has shown, which is open yourself up to the things you don't know. And when you do, you're amazed at what can happen.
Yeah, I'm really excited for everybody to listen to this, so let's get to it.
Welcome to this edition of Pure Reinvention. We're here with Amy Frankmann. Amy is the Executive Director of the Michigan Nursery and Landscape Association. Welcome, Amy.
Well, thank you, Mike.
You know, Amy, we've had a chance to meet and start to build some really interesting conversations, and I want to take some of our conversations and make them a little bit public, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
You know, Amy, we met and we started talking about some of the similar experiences we had, and one of the similar experiences that both you and I discovered was the importance of sharing and the importance of for lack of a better word, realizing we're not alone in some of our challenges. In fact, it was you who taught me and coined the phrase, "I am not alone." Mm-hmm. And that sounds really interesting, I'm sure, to the people who are listening to this. But Amy, can you describe for me what you really meant when you coined that phrase and you taught me, "I am not alone"?
Sure, absolutely. So as a leader, we go through our day-to-day things, and we run our associations, and we think things are going just fine, and then the recession comes. For me, for the pivotal moment in my career, as a leader, was my show, my trade show. Other associations have trade shows, but our trade show, it declined, and for me, that was the start of how can I lead anything if I can't make this successful? It had always been successful. In looking back now, I realize I didn't make it successful. It was the nature of the beast. Trade shows were the way that people communicated, people purchased, people did business in a lot of industries. So it really the success had nothing to do with me. But at the time, I didn't think that. And I thought, as a leader, I had failed.
Wow.
And
you really
then-
thought that you had failed because that was not succeeding the way you thought it should.
Absolutely. So I'm so closely tied to the budget, to the financials, as
Right.
most executive directors are. I really thought that was an indicator, a clear indicator that I was not a good leader. And I really felt like I was the only one feeling that. I was alone. And I went to all of these meetings. I go to, as I spend 90% of my time out of the office at meetings representing our industry.
Sure.
And there are a lot of other executive directors, people that I look at as leaders, and I thought they're all doing so well. They're successful. They're not, and I would not even approach them because why would they ever think to share anything with me because I was a failure? And then it started leaking into other things. So you start looking at everything you do in an association and running it. And you're thinking, if I can't even do a show, how can I possibly run this? How can I? And it got to the point, Mike, where I was thinking perhaps this wasn't for me anymore.
But then something happened.
Yes, it did. I was at a meeting, and I had the courage. Something was mentioned, and I had the courage to ask about that. Oh, heavens, if I was exposing the fact that I didn't know something to other leaders who I respected. And they shared that they utilized a coach. They utilized you. And so I came back and I called. And I put myself out there because it was scary.
Sure.
To admit that I needed help, number one, and that, maybe perhaps things weren't going as well as they should. But I quickly learned that I was not alone. When I thought I was and was struggling so, others are out there.
Challenged by many of the same things.
Of course. But I had no idea. I had no idea. And it's silly to think that but that's...
But how many of us can honestly say that we tend to operate in silos? We tend to be so busy, we tend to be so focused on the things that we are charged with being responsible for,
Right.
that we don't always take the time to
Right.
open ourselves up and to ask the questions and to be curious,
Right.
and then to learn and identify
Right.
opportunities that
Right.
might exist that others have already figured
Right.
out and I'm sure you've learned are more than willing to share.
Right, right. Well, you're so consumed. Your time is so consumed with working with your board and making sure that everything they need is taken care of. The financial statements. We need to make sure we're doing this. You struggle with that. You're trying to accommodate your staff, keep everyone happy there, make sure that their positions are going well, make sure that the association as a whole is moving in the right direction. When, oh my gosh, my show is going, how I don't even know what the right direction is.
Right.
And so you get overwhelmed with all of that. The first thing that I learned, scariest thing that I learned from you, from talking to a coach, is that I needed to create space.
Meaning what, Amy?
Oh my gosh, panic. I absolutely panicked. In fact, my coach, the wonderful person that he is, told me, if you can't create space, I'm not going to work with you. And I thought, there is no way that I can get another minute out of my already 12 to 14 hour day.
You mean they're not making any more time where you can add more than 24
gosh.
hours into a day?
Right. There's no way. But it's not about time. As I quickly learned, it's so much different than that. It's actually looking at everything in a different way. It's almost like stepping outside of the association, the front door, and looking in. And where in all of that, all of the different offices with the staff and myself as a leader, where in all of that can I compartmentalize and make, actually focus more on, okay, this is what we need to do. I took the one thing that was driving me, into whatever I was going to. It was my show. Mm-hmm. I took that, and instead of being scared and what do, I know what to do.
Sure.
It's revenue. So we look at where can we generate more revenue? Where are the opportunities? All of the while looking at what is going to benefit my members. I love my industry. I would never work anywhere else. I love everything that they do. I believe in them 100%. So for me, the success as a leader, it has to be all of that stuff we discussed. But it's also, at the end of the day, am I doing what I need to do for my members?
Does it translate to something valuable to your members?
Exactly.
Now, let me ask you this question, Amy. You talked about taking a step back and really looking at the business, almost third party,
Yes.
instead of being so involved in it.
Right.
But share for a minute your journey as an individual leader. How were you able to look at yourself in more of that third party way, that we're not creating any more time, excuse me, so we have to utilize my time in a different way?
Exactly.
How were you able to actually physically make that transition?
Right. Okay, so once I realized that I was not alone and that possibly other leaders, others that I look up to and respect, were going through the same, challenges, I'm going to all the meetings anyways. So I decided at each and every meeting that I go to, I am going to identify one person that I feel is a leader, that I feel is successful, and I am going to actually open myself up to them and put it out there hey, do you want to meet for breakfast? Do you want to have lunch? And let's discuss, how are you handling the situation in your association?
And let me make sure I understand this. You're on this journey where, as you have the opportunity to interact and identify other key leaders where you think there might be a learning opportunity, you're creating the space by asking them to take some dedicated time, whether it's a breakfast or a lunch or whatever that
Right.
dedicated time is, and just for that hour, talk leader to leader about whatever the two of you need to talk about.
That's correct.
And from that, you create an hour a week or 4 hours a month or whatever amount of space
Well,
you
see,
need.
It's not even about time, again. So I did that.
Oh, so I'm saying space is time, and you're
It's
saying
not.
space isn't time.
It is not. It is taking what we have and working it into, opening yourself up to finding the opportunities. Instead of going in and doing your job and not allowing the interaction with others. So I had one breakfast, and it was an hour, and it was the most exciting hour I had spent in years. It was just two people that essentially were, one is a for-profit. I met with a person from
Sure.
a for-profit corporation. Two people sharing and getting excited about what we can do, what we can build, how about this and how about that? Just throwing it out like you used to do, like they used to teach you where you threw things at the wall and see what sticks.
Right.
We did that
So-
over breakfast for an hour.
So space became giving yourself permission to be open
Yeah.
to whatever the next possibilities could
Right.
be.
To compartmentalize, okay, I have these concerns, I have these worries. Let's put them aside and let's see what we can come up with. So then what I did, because that worked so well,
Sure.
every meeting I went to, even if it was 5 minutes after a meeting with a leader I had identified, there's always a chance, there's always a 5-minute social,
Absolutely.
either setting down, or I would find somebody and I would talk to them for that 5 minutes. And I would come out of it with one great thing. What's going on with this? What are you doing with this? What do you see there? And they would share their thoughts, and I would leave the meeting. I represented the industry, but I also came back with something, and it didn't take any more time.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed that the current business model was not performing up to your expectations, now it sounds like you're becoming inspired by creating the space and giving yourself permission to create these conversations with other key leaders.
Right.
And indeed finding out that in many cases they're in the same situation and have you found most people you approach are very open and receptive to having a conversation?
Oh my gosh, everyone is. And they're almost grateful that I approach them. And I, start the conversation, in, hey, what's going on with this? And, and they feel, you can see the relief.
You can actually physically see it on their face.
You can, because they are not alone.
That's an absolutely phenomenal thought process, that
Yeah.
A, you're not alone, and
Right.
B, by giving yourself permission to create the space to ask these questions, to
Right.
start the conversation, which is, by the way, a key characteristic of leadership, starting the conversation, you're able to then move from overwhelmed or frustration to what do I do, to now you're starting to move into the space of problem solving and
Right.
inspiration and having multiple solutions.
Right,
And then from there comes all sorts of good things because
Right.
you have lots of different ideas and lots of different solutions to implement.
Absolutely.
So you have obviously, through this process of accepting that you don't have to be alone and giving yourself permission to create space and start these conversations, you have, as a benefit of that, been able to identify new opportunities.
That's exactly it. Yes.
And would you recommend or would you advise that one of the emerging leaders' role going forward in the association model a leader has to be responsible for creating new opportunities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, we're not alone in doing that. Okay, whereas before, when I was doubtful of my leadership skills, I have a great staff, and they are very, very talented. But even the thought of them excelling and doing something very well was almost a fear, that, oh my gosh, I didn't actually lead them there. And it was almost like I wanted to suppress that. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming when you don't feel like you're able to lead.
Mm-hmm.
So through all of this, through finding my space, I have looked at each of their positions.
Wow.
And where oh my gosh, they are so talented. And I'm not utilizing that.
So not only are you creating opportunities for yourself, but you're by looking at your other key team members,
Right.
you recognize by giving it a little space, you can see completely new opportunities that they could be moving into and driving the association forward.
And I need to create their space.
Oh, wow.
As
There's
a
an
leader,
interesting thought.
As the leader, I can do this. And I am so excited, changing this, changing that, these new opportunities with revenue. I can see, I can't see it all yet,
Right.
but it's coming.
Right.
And I can see where if I could do this, shift things around, like a puzzle, you just move it a little bit, that I could essentially get out of their way and let them exceed.
To what extent do you think we as leaders sometimes absolutely get in the way of our team members?
Oh, we do. We definitely do, because it's safe there.
And one of the ways you create space for others is just by getting out of their way and
Exactly letting it flow.
It's amazing. It
Yeah.
seems kind of basic, but I think our observation is that many times it's just what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We're so consumed with whatever the product is that we don't let it go and let it really grow to its true potential because of, I suppose the quality
Absolutely.
control we try to put on top of it.
Well, and we're doing our job, right? As a leader, it looks like, oh yeah, we've got them all under control.
What's really interesting is you as a leader, what the things you're describing are almost a process orientation where the process is more important than the actual product.
Yes.
And so we focus on the process, we immerse ourselves in the process, and as a result of that, we inhibit the productivity, the creativity, and the new opportunities that come when we let off on the process and start to encourage
Right.
the new opportunities.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is
Exactly.
they're absolutely there with space.
Right. Not only for me, but for my staff as well. And then, now we're going to get excited. We're getting excited about what we can do, and, how we can take the one scary thing, my show, and essentially get rid of that fear.
What you're teaching me is that the barrier to growth and success is not in the marketplace.
That's correct.
The barriers to growth and success, for many of us, maybe we need to look at our own selves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's being able to open yourself up. But the fact that I'm not alone has really helped me with that. I have meetings with top people in agencies, for our members.
Sure.
And I've found that even they think, have the same issues going on, the same challenges.
Amy, why do you think it is that we don't open up and allow ourselves to not be so siloed and to be more collaborative in our interaction with other people?
Well, I think, and I mean this in the nicest way, but I think working for a board of directors, I think that makes us be that way. Because we are not just working for a boss. We're working, in my case, I'm working for 12 people.
Right, multiples.
Multiple people who could call me, all of them today. I can talk to every single one of them, right? And every single one of them has a different perception, a different what they're thinking I should be doing. And so I am trying to please all of these people. Plus, I'm trying to take care of my staff. And staff managing people.
Sure.
There are things. plus I'm trying to move the association forward, plus I have this show that's failing, plus I'm doing this, plus I'm doing that. I am not going to admit to anybody that I can't do all of that just great, right?
That's one of the rules of leadership.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I think just the job itself, just, the silo comes with the job.
Sure. And so if that's a natural tendency is to be siloed through the description that you've just mentioned, I think what I'm learning from you is you have to put considerable energy to reversing that and opening yourself up to not be alone.
Absolutely.
And what I'm hearing you say is you have made a very specific effort
I have.
and put tremendous energy into opening up and creating the space to have those conversations.
Right. And it's interesting, Mike, what's happened where I, made a point of going to someone. People are now coming to me. And I don't know, and that never happened before. So I'm thinking it's through this process. Maybe perhaps it's somebody that I had made a point of talking to in, a month or two ago, or I had a director of an agency come up to me who has never said more than 5 words to me. And we had a discussion about a challenge that they were having with, one of the governor's initiatives,
Sure.
with staff. And
They're coming to you for advice.
oh my gosh, well, we were just chatting about it. And I, after the conversation, that would have never happened 6 months ago.
It was a great experience.
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, Amy, so you've taught us that I am not alone and how important it is to create space and how that sets you up for all sorts of new opportunities that a business can take advantage of, in this case, an association. How do we as leaders move forward?
So we're going to keep it going. I'm going to keep the learning. I'm so excited. I every day, I can't wait. Where I used to think, oh, I have another meeting. I can't wait because I'm going to learn something, not from necessarily the topic of discussion or whatever, but from the people that are there. And I'm going to just everywhere I go, I'm just going to, this is how it is, and share my experiences.
So this is an initiative that you've now owned.
Yes.
And you will, by the very nature of keeping it open and creating space,
Yes.
you will, and that will identify new opportunities, and then your job is to just sort
Yeah.
and identify and take advantage of what's clearly new opportunities right in front of you.
And it goes for both my personal, leadership, personal growth there, as well as with the association. I am so excited.
Amy, I want to thank you for this very dramatic conversation. We've been talking with Amy Frankmann, who's the Executive Director of the Michigan Nursery and Landscape Association.
Did you really tell Amy you weren't going to work with her if she didn't create the space to move forward?
You know, Misty, I do not remember if I made that exact comment, but I may have. I think
it sounds like something you would say.
Somehow indicated that this is a really important work, and if she was ready to take it serious, I was more than willing to help. But there are a lot of people who ask for your help who are not really serious.
Well, it sounds like it's the kick in the pants she needed, because she's been on this incredible journey, and I am blown away at her honesty and the way that she shared her story, and how far she's come. That she took some risks and approached some executives and other leaders that she thought all had it together, and what she found was they're in the same boat she is. She's not alone.
I mean, that's exactly right, Amy. Amy was what we would call a typical executive who has been working as the leader, and as the leader, you kind of find yourself in a silo. When you're in a silo, you tend to think that you have to have all the answers. You don't always have a chance to interconnect with others to the degree that you should. All of a sudden, it's 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years down the road, and you have siloed yourself into a spot that you're not necessarily able to engage in others to help you. And Amy just took a step back and said, I'm not sure this is the right place to be. And once she asked that very basic question, really neat things started to happen.
And I think something that we should learn from her conversation and her story is that she put herself in those places where there were other execs and other leaders. And through that, just being there, was able to then take the next step and ask questions, open herself up, and then move that to lunches and making different time with a one-on-one conversation where they really kind of explored how they could fix a problem and what other solutions were out there.
So absolutely, number one, Amy was right in that if you're going to make a difference and make a change, you have to create some space. Amy did say over and over and over again that if you can't make space, you just can't make change.
Well, it was interesting, the difference between, in her mind and the way she explained the difference between space and time. Because yes, our minutes are packed full every day, all day, more than we would want them to be sometimes. But it's not about that making the 15 minutes or the time. It's creating that space.
Creating that space to allow for new information to come in and for you to process that information in a very different way. When we're hurried, we always will go back to our old patterns. But when we have space and we have some time to reflect and to think, we do come up with different ideas, and we do come up with different understandings. And Amy was ready, but more important than that, Amy is an executive who really wants to make a difference, and that is really driving her as a successful executive. And what she will accomplish with her association will be dramatic because of that intent.
Mm-hmm. I heard her say two things that I thought were really cool and have stuck with me. One was, I walked out of my association door and looked in, and that was all figurative, but the image it creates is so impressive. It's kind of, I removed myself from the situation and I looked inside and said, okay, how do I go from here? And then she also said, on a similar vein, that I, instead of going in and doing my job, I looked for opportunities, which is back to that creating space thing.
Misty, I don't know if we've really talked about this a lot yet, but it might be an interesting thing for you and I to develop, and that is the domino effect. Mm-hmm. What really has happened here is when Amy started by creating her own space, she was the first domino to start movement. And as she then created her own space, as you said, she went outside and looked in, and she started finding other opportunities. And then those opportunities started to line up, and each domino started to hit the next one. And all of a sudden, she created this very interesting movement. And that movement started because she was the first domino. And when you watch successful people who create a new inspirational type of success pattern, it's because they were the first domino. And once they started to move and could see the effect their movement had on those next dominoes, there is no question, in my mind, there will be more dominoes in Amy's path. The question is how many? Mm-hmm. Because once she's learned to move dominoes, she's going to get fabulous things done.
Well, and she even acknowledged the shift. She said, people now come to me. And that kind of almost gave me chills to think, like, what a great evolution for her to be the person that was attending meetings and didn't want to speak up and was too afraid because she thought she was the only one that didn't have it together, to now she's respected and looked at as somebody to help tackle some problems and talk about solutions.
I'm a firm believer that other leaders recognize leaders who can create movement. It's a very difficult art to master. It does start when you create space, but more important than that, you have to have the fortitude to move past yourself. And other leaders see that, even though they don't necessarily do that. Amy will have a lot of leaders that will approach her wanting to know what she's doing, because they will recognize through the confidence they see in her what she has to offer.
Mm-hmm. If this interview is any testament to that, she has a wealth of knowledge and insight, and she's ready to share it so people can learn from her every day.
A wonderful leader. Remember, if you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it pure reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter @Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.